What you doing down there? Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for being here with me. Let me first mention, I got an Instagram. I gave in and I did it. Okay? And I'm nervous about it. I don't know. It's been a long time. I'm nervous about it. So just follow me on there. How about that? Because I need friends on there, I guess. Well, I mean, if you want to. I don't know. You don't have to. So today, we're going to talk about a very important lesson. I think it's probably the most important lesson. And that is how the entire fretboard system works. Okay. And so I wanted to make a whole kind of video just about this topic because I want to make it very clear about how this whole thing works. Because once you understand it, every new chord or scale or anything that you learn doesn't just become a random piece of information. Now you'll have a framework to kind of plug it into and, everything will just make more sense. And so the guitar isn't just a bunch of random notes or chords or scales that you need to just memorize. Everything on the fretboard is actually very meticulously organized in a very specific way. And if you aren't aware that it's organized in that way, it could seem impossible to navigate, but it's not. So let's just go over how everything works. So I like to think of music as the sound of patterns, right? And these patterns represent certain musical structures. Things like chords, scales, arpeggios, triads, whatever. And each of these structures has a specific shape associated to it. For example, a major chord has a specific shape associated to it, right? So does a minor chord, so does a seventh chord, an add 9 chord, a pentatonic scale, a major scale, whatever. Any kind of musical structure you could think of has a specific shape associated to it. And so now where do all these patterns and shapes even come from? Well, they come from the major scale, right? The mother of all musical children. Okay? The major scale is our mother. Everything in music is derived from the major scale. And so there are specific formulas that you need to use to build certain musical structures like chords and scales and things like that. So for example, a major chord is built off of the first, third, and fifth degree of the major scale. And so we would extract those specific scale degrees from the major scale, and just like that, you have your major chord. And so the way that these shapes work is that in each of them, there is a key identifier. So there's a note within the shape that lets you know what key the shape is in. So let's say you're playing a C major chord, the C is your key identifier, right? So that note, that key identifier becomes your compass, right? Once you know where it is, you can use it to move the shape from one key to another. And so what a key is it's essentially like a condo, right? Where all of your musical structures live inside. And so if something is in the key of C, that means every musical structure will be centered around the C note. And so in our analogy here, the C note is kind of like the condo president. And the same is true for every other key. They all have their own condo president note, right? They all have their centered note that all the structures are going to be centered around. And so here is the very crucial element to this whole system. All these shapes, all these musical structures that you find are movable from one key to another. Meaning, if you know a major chord in one key, you also know the major chord in all the keys, because the shape remains the same, right? And this applies to every other musical structure you can think of. You don't need to learn chords or shapes independently of one another. You don't need to learn an A major chord and then a B major chord and then a D major chord. All you need to learn is the shape itself, right? And then learn how to move that one shape to a different key. So let's keep going with our condo analogy here, okay? So we have our condo, right? That is the key. We have our condo president, which is the note that represents the key, right? So the key identifier or the root note, you might know it as a root note. And now I want you to imagine that inside our condo, there are 5 apartments. And these 5 apartments represent the 5 possible homes that all of your musical structures can live inside. And they're organized by 5 core shapes. So the C, A, G, E, and D shape. Caged. Maybe you've heard of it. And so each of these 5 core shapes provides a home for all of your musical structures. So that means a C-shaped major chord, a C-shaped arpeggio, a C-shaped triad, a C-shaped Phrygian mode. All of it, every musical structure you could possibly think of. And the same goes for A, G, E, and D shape, right? Each one is like its own apartment filled with musical structures that are built off of those shapes. And I won't go too into detail about how those shapes connect to everything. I'll link down below videos where I explain all that in detail. I'll just explain the overall functionality of how this all works, okay? And so here's how this all works applicably, right? Let's say you want to play a major chord. You would first have to pick a key, right? So that's your condo. Then you'd have to pick one of the 5 core shapes, right? Those are your apartments, right? Then you would go inside, grab the major chord shape. Then you would take your key identifier, who is your condo president, right? take him on over to the fretboard and line him up with the note on the fretboard whose chord you want to play. And the same process applies for every other musical structure you can possibly think of. Scales, triads, arpeggios, all of it. It all works in the same way. And now here comes the musical element, right? All these structures connect to one another. So you could kind of think of it as like, in our little condo analogy here, you could think of it as hotel rooms. You know that they have doors and they lead to the next room. All the rooms just kind of lead to one another. It's literally exactly like that. And I know this might seem a little bit kind of a lot, but I promise once you get the hang of it, you're able to just pick up on the patterns very quickly and make those connections. And so this is how the fretboard works. It's not just random chaos, it's a map. And once you know how to read the map, you can see that you're not just memorizing random things, right? Random chords, random scales. You're actually navigating through a very organized system. And this makes the fretboard and playing the guitar so much easier and so much more predictable because now you actually have a framework to be able to plug in all the information. It's not just random things that you feel you have to memorize. And so I hope that was helpful. I hope it maybe bridged some gaps for some of you. And don't forget to check out the links in the description below if you want to go further into detail about how different structures kind of connect to the cage system and how it all kind of just comes into one big happy condo family. I hope that analogy made sense. I think it did. I think it did. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to answer them. Hopefully I know the answer. Sometimes I wonder how I even know anything that I'm talking about. And don't forget to let me know what other lessons you would like me to make. And as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you soon. My lovey. Oh, now you're working when the video is over. How convenient.